Okay, are we on?
Not yet, almost there.
Oh yeah, last time she disappeared when she went live too.
Oh,
I don't know what
see
happened.
it says meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yay,
Oh,
hello
I see.
everybody.
Hello.
Hello, there you are. We see you.
Hi everybody, welcome. I am Fiona Rose with The Essence of You, and we are so excited to have you here and to host this interview today with Christina. And we are energy healers and coaches, and we help women overcome their anxiety and depression and find their bliss and their joy. And part of the work that we do is really helping women transform their old sexual traumas into empowerment and in allowing them to come back into their joy in their bodies. So really excited that we're having this conversation. And More, would you like to add anything?
I just want to chime in with Fiona. We've been doing this work for a long time, for actually over 20 years now, and we're so happy to have you here. And I'm so grateful that you're open and available to share your story and to really help other women hopefully feel empowered to do the same, so we can change the energy and change this reality where women are in shame and powerless positions, and bringing them up to being in power and overcoming these blockages that we have, mental blockages, right, that we have from trauma. So thank you so much for being here and sharing with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are, so people know?
Yeah, so my name's Christina Popovic. I'm a life and business coach. And I'm a mom of two. I'm a Navy veteran. I'm a military spouse of 10 years. So I'm an entrepreneur. That's a little bit about me, but yeah, this is a something that I've actually known that I was meant to share for many years, and either didn't have the courage or didn't have the opportunity or the right place to share it. So it was interesting to me to see, your post and how things work, how how God works, how all things work to be able to use something that has been a challenge, in my life, to help other women to know that they're not alone, and to know that that these things don't have to define them, that they don't define them, and that that we can use things that were maybe meant to hurt us and use them, turn them into something that can be of use or help or something beautiful, or that there is healing. Absolutely, there is healing to be had, and that there are resources available, people like you, to help to get us through those different things. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much for sharing that, and I totally connect to that. And it was amazing because when we originally made this post, that we didn't have a lot of people that reached out and were going to do it, and we just had a few, and you were one of the few. So I'm so happy that you're here and willing to do it. So if you want to maybe share your story a little bit with us, we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I'll try to share it as briefly without going off on too many tangents, and stick to what's important. But this was there were really two things that happened in my life, and I'll focus on the one and I'll mention the other. But the one that I want to focus on was I was barely 16, and I had lived with my mom. My parents are divorced. I had lived with my mom and grown up for her own, probably a lot of her own trauma reasons. I was pretty sheltered, in the sense that she tried to protect, for good reasons, she tried to protect me from things that she had probably been through. But what happened was, then I ended up moving away from my mom's house and moving with my dad, who was the opposite. Very few, much different environment, where I had a lot more freedom. And I was very innocent at the time. You know, had just turned 16, but I was very innocent. Um, I had I had I had had one sexual encounter prior to that with a boyfriend that you know, we had been dating. I loved him. He loved me. You know, it was a as ideal as your first time can be, and that was the only experience that I had had. I had you know, I had always felt respected from this boy, and so I didn't have you know, sometimes I put it that I was naive, but I prefer the word innocent because it's not our fault when we don't expect someone to hurt us or to disrespect us or to violate us, really. And so I ended up moving with my dad and this newfound freedom. And I was innocent, but I was also very um, rebellious. I was very, you know, I have a lot of spirit, and you know, I don't really know how to explain it, but you know, I wanted to be out in the world. You know, I wanted to experience things, and so I went with a friend. We went to, you know, you go to, you hear these parties, and I was always, because of probably other traumatic things earlier, I always had this sense of my own sexuality, of wanting to feel sexy, of wanting to feel older, you know, but I didn't look older. And this is something that ended up being part of the transformation of the trauma for me, is that as the years, as more and more years went on, I realized I did not look older. Okay, I had just turned 16. I probably looked 13. Like I'm small. I'm 5 foot nothing. I didn't look like I was in my 20s. You know, I did not. And so we ended up going to this party, and these are the, you know, it was all guys. It was me and two other girls. Okay, my other friend is even a little bit younger than me, and we were with her friend who was maybe a couple years older. um, and we get to this house, and they start giving us alcohol, hard alcohol. Again, I'm 16 years old. I had had a couple drinks, you know, but I wasn't used to drinking. And so, of course, I get very drunk very fast. And these are grown, you know, as the more I kind of processed it, the more I realized, like, these were grown men. Like, they were, you know, they were maybe young 20s, maybe older teens, but this was their place, right? Like, they were able to buy alcohol, like, they were grown. And so anyway, we're there. Again, I didn't feel threatened at all. We felt like we were, you know, it was exciting and we were at this place. And long story short, this guy, you know, I don't even know his name. I don't know his name. I don't I don't even know that I knew his name at the time. He takes me by the hand and he takes me into a back room. And we start making out, and that's, you know, as far as I probably thought that it was going to go, but he kept going further. Now here's the point that I want to make, and one of the main reasons I knew that I needed to tell this story is because I did not equate this situation that I'll explain the rest that happened. I did not put it didn't at the time click that it was assault. I would have never said that it was rape, um, because I feel like we're conditioned to, or we're taught, or what we see rape or assault being, it looks like a certain way in our mind, right? You're screaming, you're yelling, there's violence, he's ripping off your clothes, you know, that's what you think of when you think of rape, like you're pinned down, you know what I'm saying? And it didn't look like any of that. He actually wasn't mean to me, he wasn't violent, he didn't hit me, um he wasn't mean to me, he wasn't aggressive, but I didn't want to go further, right? Like, and I said no. I said no multiple times, but it was very low. Like, it was, and the whole, I mean, we were in a room that was quiet, so I didn't need to scream. I know he heard my nose because his response was shh, shh. He just kept telling me, shh, it's okay, shh, it's okay. And I said no, and I didn't want it to go on. but there wasn't any kind of it was quiet and slow, right? And so he ended up having sex with me. And then, I get up, I put my pants back on. And as soon as I left that room, there was another room right next to him. And he almost like handed me to his friend. And he took me in another room. And this guy just laid me on the floor and started to undo my pants. And thankfully, my friend that I was with, she came in and took me out. And she's like, you know, and part of this is important too, because she came in and she said, and excuse the language, but she's like, what the fuck, Christina, what are you doing? And she pulled me out of there, thank God. And we left. I remember us leaving, but I remember her being angry at me. And in that moment, and we've talked about it since, right? She was my best friend. The anger was fear, right? The anger was like, what is happening? And later she told me that she felt like she was responsible because she brought me to this party. It was her friend. And my response back, and I think this is important, right? The dynamics of what happens when you're in fear. There's anger that came towards me from my friend because she was scared. And then my response, even though I was like in shock, right? Like of what happened. It wasn't what I wanted. I said no. But even with my very best friend, that she's like a sister to me, instead of like breaking down or saying like, I don't even know how, I could have responded. I responded very like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. Like very nonchalant, like, oh, I knew what I was doing. I was fine kind of thing. And that's very interesting to me because there's so much of that I feel like there's so much dynamic that can happen when you don't understand what happened. And like I said, it didn't click, right? So at that time, I just felt like I had let something happen, and I didn't even it didn't even register as like such a big deal, right? But what happened later, it took about a year. I think it took about a year. It's a little fuzzy. But I think about a year later, I started to have it started one day, and then for a year straight, every single night, I dreamt that I was raped. I had nightmares that I was raped. And it was a different person every time, no one I knew, a different situation every time. But I had nightmares that I was being raped. And I did not put two and two together. It did not ever occur to me that this was post-traumatic stress from this situation that occurred to me, that happened to me, that I didn't process, that I never told anyone about besides my friend that was there. So no one helped me to process through that. I didn't have, a grown-up that I could talk to, or a counselor or anything like that. So this year goes by. I tried to see a counselor who I didn't feel like she gave me any kind of help. And so I stopped seeing her. And it just kind of became my life that every night I have nightmares. And then after about a year, I stopped having the rape nightmares every night, but I still had nightmares. And I had nightmares every night since that time. I was about 17 years old. I'm 36 now, I'm about to be 37. So about 20 years of nightmares up until earlier this year, when there was like a spiritual breakthrough for me. And now I don't have nightmares every night, but I still have nightmares frequently. Okay. And over the years, several things occurred to me. So I went from this place of when it happened of like, well, it's just something I let happen. Maybe I'm bad. Maybe I'm promiscuous. Maybe I'm slutty, like, to, well, I'm just not going to think about this. It happened. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't violent. He didn't force me. I didn't scream. Right. And so there was a lot of, well, it was my fault. I was at a party with older guys dressed all sexy, drinking. Like, what did I expect? There was this kind of like, like what we're taught, like, oh, well, if you dress sexy and you're at a party and you're drinking, well, then, like, they almost, like, what did you expect? They almost have a right to do that to you because that's what you're there for, or that's what they think that you're there for. And if that's how you're showing up, then that's what you get, kind of thing. Okay, so I had some years of that, and then realizing like, so I think it was in a psychology class in college. So years later, psychology class in college, I learned, I knew, everybody knows fight or flight, right? If you're scared, fight or flight, you either run or you fight. And it never occurred to me, this would have never occurred to me because I didn't fight. I said no, but I said it low and I didn't fight him on it. I did not fight. And I didn't try to run away. I didn't kick him. I didn't scream for help. Nothing, right? So it would have never occurred to me that that was even at all related. But in this class, they actually said fight, flight, or freeze. And I'm like, what is this freeze? And then it started to make sense to me that it wasn't my fault. I froze. I was terrified. I was 16 years old. I had only had sex once with someone who cared about me and was respectful. And then I'm in the situation that I had never been in before, out on my own, no curfew, drinking, which I didn't know how to deal with that. I was terrified. I froze, right? Like, what am I? That was my fear response, and I didn't know that even existed. And that's one of the things that I knew that I needed to share this story over the years, is because I want other women, I want all women to know that that is a fear response. That just because you didn't fight or you didn't scream or you didn't run doesn't mean that you weren't in a fear response, that there's also something that's called freeze, and that you can just be so afraid and go into, I need to survive what is happening to me, that you don't fight because you're scared, right? And I understood that that's exactly what happened to me, and that I got even more, I went even more into kind of a like like almost like a disassociation, right? Like when that was happening. And then thank God it didn't completely happen with the next person. But who knows, like if someone else had taken my friend in another room, like I could have been gang raped by I don't know how many people. Like I don't remember how many people were there. And it was something that was so, this is another thing. So that was one thing that helped me to understand this was not your fault. This wasn't because you asked for it. Wasn't because you were putting off that vibe, so that's what you deserve, or that you wanted it, or that you let it happen. You didn't. You said no. No means no, whether you scream it or you say it, right? And so that was one thing that helped me to forgive myself. And then there was a stage of kind of anger, of like realizing, because now I was in my 20s and I was a little older, and I really realized like I looked like a baby. I obviously was very young, right? And these guys, I started to realize like these guys knew exactly what they were doing. This was not the first time that they did this. It was so seamless. It was so like there was no like, I don't know how to do this. It was take your hand, take you to the back room, tell you to be quiet. Like it's like he knew exactly how to do what he did, and then to just let me go with the next, like they knew exactly what they were doing. They were old enough to understand, just because I had put myself in that situation, not knowing that that's what the situation was going to be. They took advantage of me. Like they knew exactly what they were doing, feeding me alcohol, and then taking advantage of me and violating me with seemingly no heart, like no, I was no one to them, never seen them before, never seen them again. You know what I'm saying? And so there was this, then there was the kind of the anger of like, who the fuck does that? Like, who does that? And then there was a piece of really wanting to tell that story, because I want other, at the time when I thought of this, I want other boys and other men to realize the damage that something like that can do to someone. That to them, it was probably nothing. But to me, it's giving me nightmares for 20 years. And that's not done yet. Like that's not gone. Not to mention the process, right? And I want people to know that, because I wonder if they knew that, and maybe they did, maybe they wouldn't care, but maybe they didn't. Maybe, and then the next phase, we're getting to the end phase here, was understanding that you're not born a monster. You're not born not having any regard for life, for human life, right? And so then it's thinking about, and this ties into the other thing that happened to me too, because that's horrific. And it's thinking about you've heard the saying, hurt people, right? Something happened to that person for them to be sick enough to do that, to be callous enough to do that, to think that that's okay. Like you have to grow up seeing that. You have to experience that. That has to become something that you're around, to where you get desensitized to, what am I doing? Like, this is horrible, right? And so then it's kind of the place of like, you know what? I'm not going to hate them or be angry at them, because I don't know what, I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for them. Like, what must you have gone through? What kind of life do you live if that's what you think is okay? If that's how you, that's how you connect with women, like that's how you know? And so
and I'd like to add something in here, Christina, if you
Yeah.
don't mind.
Go ahead.
I'm so grateful that you're saying this, because, obviously you're a mother, Moore's a mother. One day I will have my own children too. And it's like, for anybody watching who has sons, has children, it's so important to have this awareness when they're young, awareness of how we are teaching our boys, how we are. I think it's really a wake-up call for how are we teaching our young men to cope with life, right? Like if they have a trauma or somebody abuses them or hurts them, it's absolutely value to help them find help. Because when we help our young men get help, then they don't recreate their pain in abuse or attacks or joining a gang or something like that, right? It's only these young men that have been damaged or hurt and they don't know how to cope that would do things like what happened to you, right?
Exactly.
And so they need healing too. And just posing the question, like, how can we support them?
Yeah.
How we can create change so that they don't become abusers. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And also that ties into, you're making me think of, now it ties into the way that I parent, right? So I have a son and a daughter. My son is, he's about to be 8 and my daughter is almost 2. And one of the things what a beautiful thing that I think that comes from, going through something like that is recognizing like all these little things, like these little things that are programmed into us as kids that are probably have the best of intentions, but aren't helpful, right? So for example, I think as kids, you'll hear people say, oh, give them a kiss, give, even if it's grandma or Aunt Sally, like, oh, give auntie a kiss, give uncle a hug, and you kind of have to, like, it's kind of like, don't be rude, and one of the things, we love, our little girl, she's so cute, and she gives the cutest kisses. Her kisses are the sweetest thing you have ever seen in your life. So we all love getting kisses, right? But she's pretty picky. We'll say, oh, can I have a kiss? And sometimes she will, sometimes she won't. But one of the things that I am adamant about teaching both of them now is that if she says no, it's no. It's not, please, can I have a kiss? Please, but please, I'll give you a candy. Like, no. No means no. She doesn't have to. If she wants to, that's fine. But you don't ask more than once, right? And I'm really adamant about teaching my son that. And so it's like there's two sides to the coin, right? Teaching my son, if someone says no to a kiss, whether it's your sister, a little girl, your girlfriend later down the road, like no is no. Even if you're her brother, you're her boyfriend,
Yeah.
no is no. For whatever reason someone wants to say no to a kiss or a hug, it's no. And I will never force my kids to hug someone or kiss someone. And if that person thinks it's rude, fine, it's rude, but I will never force my kids to do that, because I want them to know this is your body, this is your space. No one has any kind of right over you, or any kind of like, this is your space and we respect that. Even something so little as that, or I have to catch myself all the time saying to my daughter, especially, because she's feisty, which I love. I'm like, stay that way, please. But she's feisty, so she'll get mad and she'll hit, or she'll and the first thing out of my mouth, it's a default that I'm working to catch myself every time, as I say, that's not nice. That's not nice. Like, what? How many times do you hear people saying that to babies? That's not nice. And I'm like, Christina, don't say that, because you don't have to be nice, right?
Yeah,
like, you don't have to be nice. So I want to, what I'm trying to teach her is good, but I want to reframe. Words are so powerful, and we can teach something so powerful, right? So I reframe by saying, please don't hit me. That hurts me. I don't appreciate that, right? Let's keep our hands to ourselves, but not this, you have to be nice, because I think that we can learn that, well, I shouldn't say anything because I want to be nice. I don't want to be rude. I put myself in this situation. Who am I to say no? Like, they're going to be mad at me, right? Like, I'm sure there was some of that like ingrained in me, which is why my responses freeze, because I don't want to be
And
rude.
I want to add to that. Yeah, because I think it's so key that you brought that up. So I just want to track back a little bit. I have also 3 little kids. I have a 3, a 5, and an 8. And what I've been teaching with them is, besides asking their body, because your body always knows, asking your body if it feels safe, but also when you're around, to be aware of the energy, because our first instinct tells us run, right? Like, I'm sure when you were going into that party, the first thing that you had was, I don't want to be here. But because we're so worried about what people think, what our friends would think, the image I'm creating here right now, right? I'm going to ignore that awareness and go with, I'm going to be in a safer place because I don't want to be judged in a way, right? It's like we're so tuned in this reality, especially as women, to shut off our awareness in order to please other people. And with your story, which I feel like so many women have been through that experience before, I can tell you that my experience were very similar to yours, where it's just you're saying no. I mean, it was just very like, not your fault, but so many of us would see this as not even being abused, just like you said. And the key is that it causes so much trauma that we're not even aware of until later on in life, until our body is actually telling us, hey, there's something going on here, pay attention. And it's interesting to me, because when you were talking about what happened to these men, right, there's so much of this happening on our world right now. And as much as it's men, I think the way our reality is right now with women, it's like we are in this apologizing place where we don't feel like we can actually stand and say, no, you're not doing this. So even though we're going through this like abuse, be it from an abuser man, or even in a job force, or like just in general in life, right? Just in life in general, when people are just using their power above, right? We are feeling like we can't stand out there and actually be like, no, you can't do this, taking our place. So it's also a place of like, where do we find our place in this reality, right? And I think there's a place where we overcompensate our masculinity and tune that super high. And then we have another issue of like really finding, okay, where can I be feminine and where can I be this masculine? There's like overcompensating, like this resisting and reacting to it. So it's just very interesting to observe this and see it from a different angle too. Like, okay, where are we not allowing this? Because that's not what we're doing. We're not allowing it. But as a collective, how do we teach our daughters too, right? You know, you stand for what's right for you. You can still be sexy. You can still be beautiful. You can still want to be touched, because we don't want to cut those parts off. Like, I think you were saying that, you know, I felt really sexy in my power. And I noticed that that's what happens a lot of times. It's like we're putting the vibe out into the world. And yes, it's attracting everything and everyone. And then it's like we're in our power. We get shut down, right? By whatever that
Yeah.
is, abuse, reality, whatever. Shut down the power, stay powerless, but then we react and resist around us in different ways. So
Yeah.
what would it take to change that, right? What would it take to change this reality? And that's what I'm hoping to get out of this, bringing these awarenesses so we can really be aware to how this stuff works and doesn't work in our life. And I just love that you're bringing this up and sharing it, because I feel like every woman goes through these experiences, sexual or not sexual.
Yeah, that is such a powerful point that you're bringing up, because I have felt that, even I can relate to that, this idea of, you know, from the time I was 5 years old, I remember singing This Little Light of Mine in kindergarten, and 5 years old. And I felt it, like, I was like, I have a light. Like, I had this sense of, of like divine purpose, of like, I'm meant to shine. Right. And that's all I was doing when I was 16. It's just that I didn't know how to do that. The only way I knew how to do that I had ever seen, or yeah, I'm learning. You're 16, you're learning, right? Is to be sexy. And maybe I was putting off some kind of vibe, but it's learning that we can shine brightly. And when things like that happen to us, then we have to relearn with help that we are
Yeah.
allowed to shine brightly and feel safe. That because there can be this thing like, well, no, I can't shine too bright or I will be in danger. And I have felt that. Like, I have literally felt this, you know, your light starts to shine brighter and you feel really good. And then there's this voice in the back of your head that's like, you better not walk out like that, or you might get hurt, you might get raped, you might get kidnapped, you might get, like, we have all this fear because of something that happened to us, that, well, I was shining too brightly, so I better dim it down so that I can be safe. But then what happens, like, as entrepreneurs, right, when we dim our light down, we can't do what we're meant to do. Like, we have to have that, you know, when that glow is on low, like, we're not going to be able to attract what we're meant to attract, to have the impact we're meant to have, because we're dimming ourselves down. We're dimming that light down. And that's our magnet, right? Like, that's our magnetism. And yet we have to then process through, how can I feel safe? How can my body feel safe? And that's something that, you know, I want to encourage every woman who's ever been through anything like this, who resonates. If you're like, oh my gosh, you're speaking to me, get the help that you need. There's so much support out there that I didn't even know. This year I found so much support around this. A trauma coach that I'm working with, finding you ladies, right, to be able to do this work, because I really, and really, this is a realization this year that I've had, that I realized I would have these questions, but I finally realized this year that my body, probably from the first thing that happened to me as a kid, learned to be in fight or flight, right? And so I think that the 16-year-old thing really anchored that in, like, solidified that programming, that it is not safe to let your guard down, right? I'm going to a party. I thought it was going to be fun. My guard was down. I was ready to have fun, and I thought I was safe, and I thought it was going to be fun. And boom, you get really hurt, right? And the same thing when the incident that happened when I was a kid, it was somewhere I felt safe. My guard was down. I thought that I was safe, and something bad happened to me. And so there's this, now it's something that I'm having to work with a trauma coach on, because I realized, I would ask myself, why can't I relax? Like, I should be happy in this moment. Nothing is happening. I am safe. I feel safe. I don't feel like anything, I don't feel threatened. I'm with loved ones. I should feel happy. I should feel calm. And yet I felt anxious. Like I felt like I couldn't relax. My body, literally my physical body, could not relax. And I just learned that my body learned to be hyper vigilant. And so I'm now getting to teach myself to change that pattern of hypervigilance, that I'm safe, that I can relax, and that I can be me. And I'm not there yet, I'll tell you, but my goal is to be able to shine as brightly as I can shine and feel safe, knowing that just because I'm shining bright doesn't give anyone any kind of prerogative to, like, it's not, I'm not putting a sign that says you have the right to hurt me because I'm shining so brightly that you can't help it. Like, no, like, and I feel like as women, we're so meant to shine brightly, and we're these beautiful creatures. And yet we've sadly, these things happen to us, and then we learn that we can't shine bright,
Absolutely. I'm so grateful you're bringing this up because anybody who's following their dreams, building businesses, creating businesses, being an entrepreneur, that is a huge money block as well. Like trauma, unresolved trauma can be a huge block to whatever we're creating. And More and I have seen that a lot. Like a lot of women that we work with are professionals, are, very successful, but they struggle in certain ways because they haven't resolved the trauma. And it's just great to have awareness and know that that can be changed and that can shift. And then the other thing I wanted to add to this conversation too is, and I just love that you both have boys, right? Both of you have young boys and you're aware of the programming. Is one of my friends who has 3 young children as well, 2 boys. She said the most amazing thing to me one day. We were talking about, I was asking her questions about how she keeps her children safe from like predators, or like how she deals with that conversation with them. And she just said, I tell them that there's no such thing as, we don't have to have secrets in our house. And she's like, if my children were ever approached by somebody that, wanted to do something weird or offer them candy or make them feel unsafe or whatever, she's like, they know to come exactly to me or to the next available person and say like, I'm uncomfortable, or I don't feel safe, or this is not right, or that person's trying to get me to tell a secret. And it really just like goes along with what we're talking about too, is like, it changed my whole reality with children, because how many times do we be like, oh yeah, this little secret, ha ha ha, like it's funny, but it really isn't funny when little kids are like feeling these things or having these experiences. And then, like you said, you just kind of shut down and you just didn't talk about it, right? Because you didn't think it was something that you had to talk about. Well, I think to anybody watching, it's like, we don't have to keep secrets about this stuff. Like this stuff does not have to be pushed under the rug, right? Like we get to talk about it immediately or whenever we're ready, right? And we get to teach our children and the children of our world that you don't have to keep secrets. And you don't have to have an adult tell you to keep a secret.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so profound, because she, with her little children, that's her motto. We don't have secrets in our house, and we don't tell secrets like it's funny, and we don't talk about it like it's cute. And I was like, that is like so mind blowing and amazing. And also for us as adults, like being able to talk about this stuff and be like you're saying, like, this wasn't my fault. You just didn't have the awareness yet, or the tools or the support yet at the time to deal with it. And now you do. Right. So I just wanted to share that, because it was like, for me, really changed everything. Because as a child, the sexual abuse that happened in our family wasn't talked about. It was a secret. And that's what made it so gross and disgusting and horrible and traumatic. If we just all fucking talked about it, if we all got help when we were young, it would have been so much better, so different. We wouldn't have had all these compounded things to deal with,
And you can see their shame, because we know that 1 out of 3 women experiences abuse, but yet only you and Julie were willing to talk about it. So we know that there's an issue, and these are just reported cases, right? So realistically, I'm assuming every woman has experienced some kind of abuse. And so, but we feel so shame about talking about it. And it's like re-enlisting the energetical thing that they took your power away. And they keep taking your power away by you not dealing with these issues, by you not talking about it, by you hiding it. They keep your power. They have still your power. That's exactly what they're trying to do. And not them. I feel like it's a reality collective thing, right? This reality is trying to dim the feminine power down, because the minute we would change it, we would take over. It will shift. This whole reality would change for everybody, for all of us, for our children, for everyone, for men too, because there's so many men that aren't like that. There's amazing, beautiful men out there, right? And so it's just evening out this power struggle almost, right? It's like this power struggle. And so the more we come out and talk about it and get out of the shame of it, we'll regain our power. So maybe you can share some of the things you've done to, gain your power back. Because, I mean, you're successful and beautiful and amazing, and you're talking about this. So what are the things that you've done to, to get to where you are right now?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And one of the things is that for me, it wasn't so much shame, right? It was it's this idea of I'm strong, I'm tough. I don't even want to look at that anymore. I'm not going to deal with it. Like, it's not a big deal. It's past, it's done. I don't want to talk about it. Right. Or it's this fear. Because even, I volunteered to do this interview, and then I'm like, do I really want to do this interview? Like, why do I never think about these? Like, why do I not think this through or whatever? But what was it? It wasn't shame. It was, do I really want to open this can of worms right now? Like, because there's part of us, and I think as strong women, right? We're strong and we can handle a lot. But sometimes some of the ways that we handle it, at least for me, is that I shut that away. And so this idea of it's, if you peel back, if you go underneath a few layers, it's, I don't know if I can handle really opening up this can of worms and spending an hour on it, because I can handle it. I know it's there. I can say, yep, I've had an experience, but opening it fully up, really looking at it, really talking about it, can I handle that? Because I'm bringing it out, whereas
So can I ask
sometimes,
you a question?
yeah.
As to how much energy have you spent in your entire life not opening that?
Yeah, a lot.
Probably a lot more than an hour.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really my point. It's like, as women, like, we're warriors and we have this inner strength that's incredible. And at the same time, like, I want to encourage, and this is as much for me as it is for everyone else, of knowing that it's not, it is one way to deal with things, right? Like, if I just cut that off, then it's one way to deal with it. And it doesn't work. Yeah. But it's at what sacrifice? I've sacrificed a lot to deal with things that way. And it's something that I'm still needing to work through to get to the place where that's not the way that I, by default, um, deal with things, in the sense of being able to handle it, kind of thing, to be able to handle things. Because that's one of the things that I really had to start doing work on. And one of the reasons I went back to counseling this year, and I did some hypnotherapy. To answer your question, I'll get to what specifically I've done just this year to really, really dive into healing trauma. It's kind of been my focus this year. But it was this realization, this is what triggered it earlier this year. It was this realization that I'm dealing with it all, like, I'm handling it all with a very strong facade, but that everything is like right under the surface. Like, I mean, it would be just a conversation with my husband. Like, if we just peek under there, it's like floodgates of like, this hurts so bad that I can't even look at, like, we just leave the blanket over it. And then I look really strong and I feel really strong. But if you just pull up, it was like so incredibly painful. And these are things that happened 20, 30, 30 years ago, that I'm like, no, I don't want that to be bubbling under, boiling under the surface. I don't want that anymore. I want to actually heal it so that it's not just right under the surface. So I started with counseling, kind of traditional counseling. I did some hypnotherapy, which I found really helpful. I'm working with a trauma coach in a 10-month program. I had the pleasure of doing a healing session with Fiona, and I look forward to doing more. That was incredibly helpful. I rediscovered and fell in love with EFT, which was really helpful for me. Meditation, visualization, journaling, and honestly, just being open to deciding that it's time to heal some of that stuff instead of just having it, having the strong outward appearance kind of thing. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing those pieces and, doing the work, because I love what you said about how it's like boiling under the surface. And I'm just thinking, like, how many women out there are living with this stuff just underneath the surface, and they wonder why they have certain issues. Like a lot of women that have chronic anxiety or depression or lack of libido, it's because those things are bubbling under the surface and they're not being resolved. Right. And so the good news is that when we have the awareness that it actually is stronger to let that stuff out, like you've done, and, Maura and I have done, like, we've done years of work on our traumas. It's like, I thought about this yesterday. Like, I had such an amazing weekend and my life is really beautiful. And I thought, if someone would have told me 10 years ago that my life would be this beautiful, it would have been all I needed to know to start the work. I still did it, but it was hard to start the work, because I didn't want, like you, I was like, I kind of like this cover up thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it kind of makes me feel powerful, but not really.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, I just, like, to anybody who's thinking that way, like, the strength really is in the ability to open up, to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to find the help that you need. Because once you start unbubbling all that stuff and letting it go, you're going to find that life is worth living. Life is beautiful. There are so many people that love and support you and that want to love and support you, and that our relationships get to be beyond our wildest dreams. I mean, we get to have friends and community and lovers and clients and all of that are way supportive and loving. And I just feel like sometimes we just need somebody to tell us that, sometimes we just need somebody to be like, it gets to be better. And it is a strength to be vulnerable and to open up and let it all come out,
Yeah.
And I just think about the people that aren't doing that. And I just want to say to you, like, you deserve it.
It's interesting when you're talking, Fiona, it's like, in a way, what you're talking about, right? Like support. And it's like we cut off that feminine part of us that actually is that being vulnerable. That's like the feminine side, being vulnerable, being nurturing, taking care of ourselves. And we take that masculine more like, I can handle it. And I was just so connecting to that, like, by giving away that power, in a way, we give up that feminine power. And it's time to just gain that back, to balance it out. Right. And create that relationship with ourselves again that's balanced. So we don't have to, overcome it, just like we were saying. I love that.
Yeah, I want to add one thing, because I think that one of the reasons it took me so long as well is that I didn't know that. So you said, I love how you said that, and this might have been in a private conversation of ours, but how there are all these symptoms that we don't know are a result of trauma. It might have been trauma 20 years ago that you thought was no big deal. Sometimes we have no idea. And I think there was a lot of symptoms that I had no idea were tied to past trauma. And so if you're watching this video, it's not a coincidence, right? Like, it's not a coincidence. And I think that once I heard the one thing and it like dinged over here and I started to pull the thread, that it was like, oh, and then it linked this and linked that. And I think there's a lot of, if you're watching this, there's something that drew you to it, to speak to someone who specializes in trauma, because I spoke with other counselors and no one ever tied it to trauma. And so now it's, I've spoken to my coach, I've spoken to you, and it's being able to hear, oh, that's a normal response to trauma. There's so much freedom in understanding why you've been a certain way for so many years, why you felt a certain way for so many years, and never having the connection, because you don't know what you don't know. And there was a lot that I just didn't know that was connected to trauma, that now I'm learning more and more. Oh, it's connected to trauma. It's connected to trauma. It's connected to trauma. And being able to then heal, and even heal, along with my husband, for him to understand certain things, certain dynamics in our relationship that even I don't understand why I do that, or why I feel that way, or why that triggers me. And more now we're understanding, and we're able to work better together, because it's all making sense. It's like,
Oh, that is
It's
so
so
amazing.
true.
Yeah.
And the thing in our reality too is that the minute you have symptoms of depression or anxiety, which I think a lot of times happens after you have kids, because a lot of times we have children, it goes, we give birth, and this whole feminine experience brings up a lot of the stuff. And a lot of women then start having experiences, these symptoms. And immediately they go to, oh, I just need to go and get medication for that, and it's become this place where that's so much easier to just go and take a pill and kind of numb it down and then ignore the situation. Where really, when you are really willing to heal it and look into it, and you are seeing that it's caused by trauma, and you can heal it, you don't need, that stuff. It's just your body's way of telling you, hey, something's going on here. You need to pay attention. And it starts with nightmares, and I think it's a gift that you could do it at 37. We have a lot of clients in their 60s that just now, and they come to us like a last resort for body pain. And then just from that, you find out that it's, their body's way of telling them, hey, this has been happening. You need to heal it and clear it so you can be free of it.
Yeah.
So thank you again so much for having the courage to really be here and share your story and say these things, because they're so powerful. And I feel like they're so empowering to so many women out there. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. The last thing that I want to say that I really feel compelled to share is that don't let someone else's definition of trauma make you think that your thing is not big enough to be called trauma. Right? Because that was the thing. That's what kept me from making the connection for 10 years, because I thought my thing wasn't, oh, that's not sexual assault. That's not rape. It wasn't violent, whatever. It was my fault. It was no big deal. It's thinking, no, my thing's not that big of a deal. It can be something that no one ever told you was traumatic. If it was traumatic for you, if it's caused you any kind of, like, it's caused a thing, it's trauma for you, and it doesn't have to be big. It can be something small. So really quick, the first thing that happened to me as a kid, that's one of the reasons I never spoke to anyone about it, because by the definition, it wasn't anything. But to me, it had the same effect as if it would have been full blown, whatever, to your black or white case. It had the same effect psychologically on me, and to this day. And so it had the same effect of putting my body into hypervigilance for the rest of my life. And it didn't, someone else would say that was literally nothing happened to you, but I will say something happened to me. And that's my truth. And I think that there's this disconnect between, well, my thing wasn't bad enough, so it wasn't traumatic, it wasn't trauma, I can't work with a trauma coach, nothing happened. If it was traumatic to you, something happened. And trauma is trauma, and we each experience that differently in our bodies, and what that made us feel, and what that triggered, and how that made us afraid, or you know, how that affected us. There's nothing too small. There's nothing too small.
Thank you.
It's
That's
so
amazing.
true. Thank you so much for sharing that. Especially because when you are a kid and you go through this, your awareness is so open. Kids are like mind readers. A lot of times I notice with my children, I don't even have to say stuff and they respond to what, I could just think it. They're so open. And as children, because we're so aware, when somebody is around us and they have those thoughts and feelings, we perceive it as happening. Like we could feel that and we could perceive it as happening. And like you said, even if it's really small, you could perceive all the energy and all the thoughts and processes that were going in the other person's mind and take them on you and create that, and that is very real. Very real. And other stuff that come from past lives that we're not going to do on that, but that comes too, of course, because we're just can be born with it. So I totally connect to that. And thank you really for saying that, because so many people experience this and they don't think it's big enough to work on.
Right. And that's one thing I tell my children. I don't care if you're like, oh, they're not really doing anything. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, you kick them, you run away, you come to me, you tell me, I don't care if you think you're going to get in trouble. You will never get in trouble for taking yourself out of a situation that made you feel uncomfortable for any reason.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so amazing. Well, Christina, before we end today, would you want to share about how people can follow you or contact you too for your work? Just curious.
Yeah, the best place to find me is on Instagram. I love Instagram, so you can find me at Christina.Popovic on Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And for any of you watching, I just want to encourage you to like, comment, and share with anybody. You can share this video with anybody who you feel like is struggling or is scared and needs a little inspiration to reach out for help, and whatever that may look like to them. And reach out also as well if you want to follow us. We are on Instagram and Facebook, Essence of You. And we have a 6-week program coming out in August where we're going to work on helping people overcome their anxiety and depression naturally without medications, with energy healing and coaching and support. And I'm really excited about that course. And so please reach out, and you can also go to our website to find some more of our free content. We have a lot of free videos and classes posted and events that we host every month, free events. And you can go to youressence.org and reach out. And if any of you are looking for more specific one-to-one support, you can also find on our website a free consultation where we will talk to you one-on-one and let you know how we can support you on a deeper level. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Have an amazing day.
Bye.
Bye.